Good evening, everybody. It's the old wolf here again. Long time no see. Here, January 25th, 2022. Making it back in the world, coming at you live, Rochester, New York. Deep in the northern, cold, snowy, crappy kind of, this is winter. But yes, I have returned. For those of you who follow us on Facebook, we had a little dance with the COVID out here. Couldn't tell you what flavor it was. Could have been the Omicron, could have been the Tutti Frutti. I will tell you this though, it did not take long. I kind of walked into the house, looked around and said, hey, there are 4 of you here. And within 24 hours, everybody was fucking sick. Brother John, great to see you. Hello to everybody. So yes, tonight's episode, The World According to the Wolf, is going to be a lot of me reflecting on these last 2 weeks. Not just the COVID, but, you know, the world in general. So again, for some of you, may or may not be following things. I'm sure everybody has heard about the 21st century plague, again, the COVID.
Yeah,
Now,
has anybody not heard of the Rona at this point?
I don't know. But what I do know, and again, I just take this from my own personal experiences, but science is a real thing, okay? I get it. People have their beliefs. They have their little nuances, so we try within a civilized society to kind of be like, all right, that's your thing. Cool, that's your thing. However, firsthand, again, it did not take long, and it went through a couple of different little variant dances just within our house. And again, I want to say this first and foremost. I am incredibly grateful that everybody here is coming out the other end of it, that, you know, nobody had to be hospitalized, nobody here, you know, got so sick that it was ridiculous. But I can tell you that it came in fast and it came in hard. And it had a couple of different aspects to it. The 2 boys both went through a couple different variations with, you know, the fevers and the aches, and, you know, the associated dehydration. It went a little bit harder on me. I had an ugly fever for probably close to 3 days. Shiya.
Oh no, it was longer than that.
Well, at least 3 days that I can remember, because I was deep in that fever shit.
Oh yeah.
And thank God, and again, I want to say thank you to my beautiful witch here, Shiya, because she went out of her way to take care of us. And this was her second dance with it. And
Yes.
it hit her the easiest out of all of us, but it still hit her. And we danced through a whole variety of the symptomatic aspects. I can tell you this, it flattened me out. Thankfully, it didn't go into my lungs, but it went just about fucking everywhere else. And literally, I mean, everywhere else. For some of you who've ever had to deal with this particular terror, there's nothing quite like being half in, half out of a fever and just being terrified that if you fart, you're going to shit yourself. All right? Real things, real problems. Thankfully, I did not shit myself.
Thankfully.
But I can tell you, I made so many runs to the bathroom to avoid soiling everything around me.
And the witch greatly appreciates not.
Yeah, she appreciated the fact that she did not have to clean up my shit.
Yes.
So there's that. There's a positive note. But I am still just now, and I'm 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks now of Nance's, just getting my strength back,
Yeah.
being able to be functional. Now, this thing kind of shifted as we came through it, and then it turned more into, you know, the stomach, you know, the weakness, the dehydration, the muscle and joint aches. And again, a lot of people have gone through worse. But the shit is real. Now, I also want to kind of footnote this, that everybody here in the house, we decided as a family that we felt it was better to be a part of the vaccination elements, because science has proven that, yes, it is not exact, but this is how we can build upon and make the science stronger, aka make the vaccines better. So we decided again as a family that, yeah, we're going to do this. So we all went through the vaccinations. We've all gone through the recommended and kind of, I guess you could say, scientific based element of using masks, social distancing, avoiding, for the most part, large contained crowds and stuff. And despite everything that we did, it still found its way into our house. Now, I don't say that to say, hey, don't go wear masks, hey, don't get vaccinated. I strongly recommend, okay, if not for your sake, for the people around you that you care and love about, because it affects everything differently. We have a good friend that is still in a rehab, and she's been in this rehab for months.
Yeah, she's excited she was able to walk 20 feet.
Right. But it has devastated her. It has devastated her quality of life. And that's not to mention the people that we know that have fucking died. Personally.
Yeah.
Died from this fucking thing.
My adopted mother died with COVID.
And it is an unfortunate reality. Now, yes, you can make a lot of cases for a lot of this, that, and the other things. However, to kind of start off my particular little dance within this element, because one of the things, dancing in and out of the fever and having a lot of time to kind of spin around in my own head, sometimes the only thing that we have is our ability to communicate, to share, to pass along knowledge, ideals, to share within the framework of empathy, our feelings, our concerns, our cares within that scope. And I have to tell you, I am absolutely sick and fucking tired of people dancing out there with stupid shit. Again, if your position, if your take is, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable with it, because that's fine. That's your personal choice. But when we're using the element of not only disinformation, but I'm going to call it stupidity, to make some bullshit case because it fits within some other particular narrative, got a lot of people that are dancing around out there with this whole, you're not taking my freedom. Bill Gates has got a fucking, tracker in it, and all these other fucking tinfoil hat stupidity.
If you live on the grid, you're already tracked.
Right. If you have a credit card, if you have a bank account, a cell phone, a computer, a video game system, an Apple Watch, a car,
any of the
pretty much
Amazon devices,
most, if not the overwhelming majority of our daily lives, at least within, the aspects of Western society, is already framed in to all these elements. Now, Colleen throws out a little thing. Our choice was taken away. The OSHA Biden mandates are being pulled back as tomorrow. Yes, so we've had a legal interpretation that we can't obviously set basic mandates into place. And I'm not going to debate the elements of freedom of choice. I will only simply say this. At some point, common sense has to come into play. at some point, choices have to be made. You don't get it both ways. Now, as a student of history and as an educated person, there are elements within our framework here, and I'll speak just in the context here of the United States, within our Bill of Rights, within our Constitution and stuff like that, that they say that there has to be times when the greater good has to come into play. Now, a lot of people feel that that infringes upon their rights. Here's the flip side, and I will only say that the other side of the coin now is that we've taken away the rights and the choices of others who are more vulnerable. And I will use our analogy. We've tried to do everything that we can, masks, vaccines, all of that shit. But because there was no system of framework in place at one of the boys' jobs, they have been actively making them work while they are sick or being in fear of losing their jobs. Now, again, I do not believe that people should necessarily lose their job because they do or don't want to get a vaccine. I think it's a bit extreme. However, if you are in a context, I believe, where you can theoretically put somebody else at risk,
Stay home.
there should be an element of protection. Because here's where the argument goes, okay? We want to talk about free choice. We want to talk about our rights. But this little particular caveat now becomes the foundation for the guy with herpes who wants to make your fucking burger at McDonald's, because why is his disease any less relevant, or his or her rights any less relevant versus a COVID or versus a flu? So, with that being said, this is where a lot of us have been trying to make the point that this is an incredibly slippery slope. We are saying that, hey, we don't want these aspects put into place. We don't want our ability to choose taken away, and we forget that there are consequences, that there are ramifications. Yes, everybody should have the right to choose for themselves. But in this same argument, and here's where it's going to get even more interesting, boys and girls, our choice was taken away, okay? So when you have a state like Texas, who's now created some incredibly draconian loopholes within Roe versus Wade and a woman's right to choose, it's okay to take away people's right to choose when it fits within a particular framework. In other words, if we don't like what you're doing, we're going to make you do this. But again, the argument here, and again, I mean this in no disrespect to everybody, I'm just saying that if we're going to take a position, let's take a position besides something that actually makes a little bit sense. Let's have honest conversations about where these choices now lead us. Because now we're saying, and John hits upon it very correctly, we talk about we can't take their rights. They want to use the right to get rid of other rights, such as free religion, a woman's right to choose. So we want to have it on one hand. Don't tell me to get the vaccine. Don't tell me what to do. But we'll tell a woman what to do with her body.
Can't have it both ways.
That's not saying that I'm a fan of abortion. I personally do not believe in abortion, but that's my personal context. It's not my body. And Helene makes a point about Big Pharma, and I absolutely agree with you on that. See, this is where we have hope in that we can find some middle ground, okay? But we have to be smart about it so that we don't find ourselves so far down the rabbit hole that we do more damage, because that damage really are people's lives.
Well, it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf. You have Big Pharma, who has created this whole thing of distrust around it, and when they do something good, now nobody trusts them because they fucked up so much other stuff.
Oh,
when
absolutely.
they're working for the greater good, people aren't trusting the greater good thing.
And this is the same analogy where a lot of people have problem with our government is because politics, and I say this again, is fucked up on both sides of the fence.
Science should not be political.
Okay? What are the frameworks of our Constitution, of the framework of our society, okay, is a simple concept. Separation of church and state. They recognized well over 200 years ago that you can't have religion and government. The two of them are not compatible because there are elements of religious philosophy, dogma, whatever you want to call it, that directly contradict into other elements. It doesn't make them wrong, but again, in an open, free society, when we talk about our rights, that is one of the foundational elements. So when we're making decisions based on supposed morality elements, aka a right to a child's life, you can agree that nobody wants to see a child die. I don't think anybody consciously says, hey, let's go out and kill children. It's an unfortunate reality. You don't have to like it. But again, it is an individual's right to choose, and in this context, a woman's right to choose what she does with her body. But now on the flip side of it, and George Carlin had a very, very well-known skit that he talked about it, we'll be right up there wanting to execute people for questionable shit. We'll be right there, bombing third world countries or sending our kids to die in fucking deserts in the middle of nowhere. And more importantly, again, we have created a system that's completely untenable. It's not sustainable. Carlin's joke was, you see this framework with a lot of, religious white women, but you don't see them taking, black crack baby fetuses and carrying them to term.
No.
You don't see them opening up their homes, and that's not to say everything. And again, you got to remember this is in the context of comedy. But his point was valid, that, and it's both sides of the coin here. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or if you're on the right. We create these double standards. We create these frameworks that say, hey, we want to do this over here, but we're not going to apply the same standard over there. And it's fucked up. And a lot of it, and Helene hits right into it, is based off of the corruption of capitalism, money. Pharmaceutical companies have blown apart our economy to such a degree that, again, it too is systemic within generations of family. I've had to dance some dances, and I've had to make some hard choices in regards to my trust with pharmaceutical companies, which I can tell you is about 0 to none.
Dude.
But in the same instance, I recognize that science is our best defense against a lot of this stuff, be it a COVID or be it in pollution or aspects. Now, there's always that in-between element. And a lot of people are talking, the science is. Well, science is not 100% static. It does shift. It does adapt. It changes sometimes based on our knowledge. And again, there are cases to be made that a lot of the things that we have done in the name of profits, and I say we as a generic aspect, not you personally out there, maybe you, I don't know, but there's not to say anybody out there personally, but we fucked with some elements of things that are now coming back to bite us in the ass. And some of that has been because of elements within not only our, I guess you could say, research, quote unquote, standards, but within elements of, weaponization. And this is a global element. This is not something that's unique to the United States. We've seen horrendous outbreaks in other places in the world based on, stupidity, based on economics, based on wrong place, wrong time. And again, a lot of it is contextual, time and place. It's very hard to, compare an element from the early 1900s with the Spanish flu versus a COVID or a swine flu or a Hong Kong flu or a bird flu or whatever the case may be. But here it is, and this is what I believe, if we can reframe it, may be, again, a better place. We can agree to disagree on certain elements of things, but we have so much technology and so much in the way of resources that there is no reason, no excuse that we shouldn't be able to handle these things. And the reason, and I believe, and it ties into a little bit of what Helene said and a little bit of what John said, is that there really is no desire at the levels between government and industry to do that. Because if we cure things, then there's no profit in treatment. When we fix elements of things, it eliminates not only our dependency, but it removes what I like to call some of the control variables that are put into place to keep a population doing the things they want, aka with one of the boys had to go through, because there are no standards, because there's nothing within OSHA or anything else that says, hey, the company can't force you to fucking work while you're sick. So what does my boy do? He says, no, I'm going to do the right thing. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to let people down. I think I'm okay. The first test we took all came back negative. Okay, 48 hours later, they came back positive. So, yeah, the science isn't 100%. The testing isn't 100% for sure. And of course, by default, that means the vaccine's not going to be 100%. But we're just recycling the stupidity now. We're saying that, hey, and again, call this for whatever it is, that we're willing to let this thing burn through and kill people. Okay? Kill people rather than deal with it for what it is.
Yeah.
Rather than, instead of subsidizing the pharmaceutical industry, that we say in no uncertain terms, let's kill this shit. We have a whole vaccine system for the flus and stuff like that. And the argument, and I've heard, and it's a valid argument, is that people still get the flu every year. But yet, those vaccines drive profit margins for pharmaceutical companies, and they have been for generations. And again, Helene commented on it. A lot of the shit that they put out there, from numerous elements, is bullshit.
Yep.
Okay? It's based off of profits, not based off of what's good. You just look at the whole Edison-Tesla thing. Okay?
Yep.
There are 1,001 examples. And again, I don't say this to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, but when you have everybody freaking out about Joe Rogan and his fucking bullshit that, for whatever reason, he just decided, and don't kid yourself for a second. This is all planned bullshit. All of these characters are getting paid. Okay? They're getting paid big money. Okay? They're either selling fucking pillows or selling commercials for pillows, or they've got thousands of shares of these particular companies. You want to talk about insanity, and you want to talk about, smoking guns. When it came up this week, when a couple of people, and there were some bipartisan elements about prohibiting people within government from trading stocks. All of a sudden, everybody had science and blah, blah, this and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of us have been saying this from the beginning. The only way you're going to change politics, at least within the United States, is you have to fucking remove money from the equation.
That's never going to happen.
Okay? Even a 5-year-old child understands the concept that if you put the rats in the cheese warehouse, eventually you're going to have no fucking cheese. Okay? Yeah. Power corrupts. Okay, again, it's not a perfect system. However, if you remove certain variables from the equation, you will at least limit it down. Term limits. You know what I mean? You know, a lot of our system is upside down. And I have a lot of friends, as Shiya does, that live in other places in the world, and they look at us and they're like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
Yep.
This is insanity. Now, again, this is beyond the scope of politics. It's beyond the scope of religion. It's beyond the scope of belief. Okay? We know from very, very basic elements that a virus is an organism. Okay? It's just a microscopic organism that we can't see. And this organism, what it does, its whole purpose is to find people, get into them, and fuck and reproduce and take us over to use us as basically a Wegmans shopping center to feed upon until we die. That's what a virus does. By its very definition, its existence, that's what it is. Now, I could bet you dollars to donuts that it were fucking Martians in UFOs or, 30-foot fucking radioactive lizards stomping through the streets. We would get our fucking shit together in a heartbeat and we would do what needs to be done. Now, again, I'm okay going on record as being an antivirus guy. I say fucking kill it. Why are we wasting the time, again, well, let's do treatment. No, fuck that. Kill it. Figure out its biology. And I don't give a shit if, whatever that context means. But we've already learned from the flu. Okay, and I don't believe, personally, and I don't think most people believe, that with the technology, the elements of what we have, I joke about this, but, we could broadcast Paris Hilton's pussy across the globe in fucking, high definition, but we can't somehow deal with a microscopic organism. It's bullshit. And it does. It goes back to the pharmaceutical companies. It goes back to the control mechanisms. Here's the unfortunate argument that I've seen play out, and I think it's fucked up, but I think there's some truth to it. I think that there is an element within our society, within our world, that is quite happy to let this thing do what it does. What quicker way to some population control? Well, we got too many people. We don't have enough food. There's only so many, pairs of the new 2023 Nikes coming out, so we gotta clear the waiting list. So we'll just let a fucking virus rampage within communities of color, within poor areas. And that's where most of the damage has been done. It's been done because these people don't have resources to begin with to deal with these elements. Let me tell you something. If it wasn't for the fact that we had access, to things like the Pedialyte to maintain, certain elements within basic needs, fluids, magnesium, vitamins, minerals, etc. My brain can't even get around. Medications, whatever the case may be, it would have been much, much worse. Yes. Much different. Now, here's the other flip side again, and there are many flip sides within this. Some of this now, because of the other underlying aspects, have also led us down to some of these other questionable roles. And I will use Helene's analogy of the whole Fauci thing. Say whatever you want about this guy, okay? He's not the reason the virus is here, okay? All that little side babble bullshit is just that. It's bullshit. Say what you want about the guy's policy. Say what you want about him not probably being as honest as he should have been, but anybody that was there and watched those press conferences and looked at any of those elements, it's a fucking miracle we didn't blow ourselves up with the level of incompetence that was going down across the board.
Yep.
Does that mean he should get a free pass?
No.
No. But if we're going to really make change, and if we're really going to deal with these things, we have to deal with the things that are tangible. We can't, again, just get sucked down the rabbit hole into, like I said, some of the more extreme elements, because they're not true. They just fit a really comfortable narrative. And I say this again for both ends of the spectrum. Not all Republicans, right-wing people are Nazis, okay? Just as not all left-wing liberal people are communists hiding, waiting to, you know,
eat your children,
to make your children fucking binary neutral. You know what I mean? And again, some of the stuff that I'm seeing out there is fucking ridiculous. You know what I mean? People's sexuality, okay? Personal right. You want the right to choose not to get a vaccine, then, you know, somebody has the right, if they want to identify a particular way, let them identify it. Does that mean that certain elements should get crossed over? Personally, my belief is no. And again, you know, here it is, Helene. I looked at that, and there's nothing. That's all just blabber talk that guys like Steve Bannon and others, there are no patents. None of that stuff is true. It's all bullshit. There's nothing. There's no documentation that says that Fauci had anything to do with China and the government elements. That is a cherry-picked element from something else that was an academic element within multiple countries and multiple people, not just Fauci, okay? Again, this is where we're going sideways. People are cherry-picking elements and saying, oh, this means this. No, it doesn't mean that.
And I can also prove it because I turned around and had the COVID virus January of 2020 before it was announced, before any kind of shutdowns. And they're like, well, how can you prove it? Well, because I went and had the freaking blood test in May, or actually in June, sorry, to prove that, yeah, I had the antibodies from COVID, so I had the COVID.
And again, you know, it is, and I understand to the degrees, yes, we're all going to have to find the middle ground to agree to disagree, but I would humbly suggest again, and this is where, you know, some of the disconnect is having, look at where your information is coming from. Look at what stands to reason, and look at what stands to be gained. And it happens on both ends of the spectrum. Oh, yeah. Okay?
Nobody's
Again,
innocent of this one.
but there are elements that we do have that have, for generations, maintained a middle line. That's why we have academic groups and scientific societies and structures of things that are outside of politics, okay? And, you know, like Ash, I don't trust the mainstream on either side as well, too, because they're pushing different narratives. You have to look outside the box. You have to look at what really is in play versus, again, what stands to be gained from a particular narrative. You know, again, it's not hard to connect the dots with certain things. You know, when you got a fucking crazy guy running around trying to sell fucking pillows, talking insane shit, you know what I mean? It makes everything legitimate that people who identify as conservative stand for. And that's really, again, rather than making it a left or right thing, look at the elements at what's in play, okay? Because this is historic. If you look at history, outside even the scope of the United States, this is how civilizations collapse. This is how whole societies fall into, as the Ash says, the batshit crazy, yeah. Because you have select individuals pushing the narrative for false agendas, for their own ulterior motives. Now, again, where do you separate it? How do you say, well, this is real versus this is not? And like Chris says, I try and follow the science. I try and look for multiple elements of things. I don't just read this. I read the Wall Street Journal, which is a very conservative publication, but I also read the New York Times, which is a very liberal leaning group. Okay? I have followed elements of different people, regardless of what side of the fence they were on, based on what they brought to the table. And I've said this before. I thought John McCain was a good example, was a good Republican. He was a soldier. He was a good father. He was a good role model.
He was a man of integrity.
Okay?
Even if you disagreed
But
with
I
him.
also believe that Barack Obama was a good man and a good father and tried to bring elements to help. Were they perfect men? No. But they respected each other, okay? And they understood, and for those of you that are a little bit older like myself, I'm going to be 54, that even when we disagreed, we had a little bit better framework of interaction that we could communicate. Now, again, you can make a case, you go back to 64 and what happened to Kennedy? They fucking shot him. What happened to Martin Luther King? They shot him. What happened to Bobby Kennedy? They fucking shot him too. So, yes, you can make an argument that, our system has been out of whack for some time. And those elements have been and will continue to be framed not only around political elements, but cultural elements. And Ash brings up a great point. I don't believe people in government respect us at all. Mm-hmm. We are the means to the end.
Yeah.
And as with every civilization, and again, if you look at it historically, this is how Rome fell. This is how, Alexander's empire fell. This is how pretty much every civilization since the beginning of recorded history is that you have a section of a population that pushes the element, your French Revolution, your fucking, your Marxist Revolution. All these things happen, and Helene hits it correctly, divide and conquer.
Yeah, the truth is normally somewhere in the middle. The polarization
it's easier and better for them to keep us all fucked up about stupid things. So we're all fighting with each other, and we're like, MSNBC, Fox News, blah, 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 instead of finding the common elements. Now, again, some of this, listen, and, again, for any of you who have studied elements of that, your basic fucking sociopath can beat a lie detector test any day of the week. So we don't really have a good framework, you know what I mean, to be able to separate. I would love to be able to say, hey, let's give you, some type of, fucking truth serum or Wonder Woman's fucking golden lasso. I don't give a shit, but there's no real way to quantify it besides the framework of a person's actions. And I think most people agree. You look at politicians and they just fucking talk. Mm-hmm. Very rarely do we see things actually play out in the way that it's needed to happen. And some of it is fucking blatant. Now, again, we can find middle ground on certain things. But when you have, and I'm just going to say it, when you have white people freaking out that a teacher in school might tell their kids that when we first started this country that we made black people slaves and we treated them like shit for generations and we raped and we murdered the indigenous people here. I mean, again, it's just, it's like, walking out into the street naked and then trying to pretend that you're not naked. If there isn't a fucking better or more definitive definition of fucked up, it's just like the only way history does not repeat is when we have to Be honest about it. And Helene is correct. It is in our history already. And up until recently, I don't understand, what the issue is. But now all of a sudden we've got all this critical race theory insanity when there really is no such thing as critical race theory. It's a fucking made up word to kind of throw an element.
It sounds good.
Because we don't want to really have a conversation. And here's the kicker, okay? And it's in the proof in Florida. They put a law out there, put it in writing, folks, that the teachers can't say things that make white people feel uncomfortable. There it is in your nutshell. Now, again, I'm not saying that anybody alive here today had anything to do with fucking slavery, okay? I don't begrudge a person regardless if you're yellow, black, red, okay? I judge you based on how you treat other people. I judge you based on your actions, okay? So if you act like a flaming asshole, I don't give a shit if you're a black flaming asshole, or if you're a Latino flaming asshole, or you're a non-identifying binary fucking asshole. You're an asshole still. It's just like every asshole, they come in different shapes and colors and sizes. Okay. But again, when we have so much else going on that really needs our attention, we're off spinning on this insanity instead of having a conversation about how our children are killing themselves in record numbers because we have so deep of a fucking system of mental health elements within framework of self-esteem, how people identify and interact with each other, that instead of worrying about that, we're worried about that we might be talking about, black people in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable. It's like,
somebody
Jesus
might
Christ.
Get offended.
You know what I mean?
Offended by suicide rates.
Oh, and the cancel stuff. Don't even get me started. Like, again, I think fucking Joe Rogan is a fucking idiot for the shit that he said, but should he be canceled for it? No. That's part of the freedom of the rights that we have. I can come out here and I can talk about stuff. You don't have to like it. You don't have to listen. I'm not going to hate you because you don't like it or you don't want to listen. I'm going to try and talk honestly because I actually give a shit. I don't want to see anybody suffer. I don't want to see anybody die. I don't want to see black people beaten in the streets. And I also don't want to see us spin into some twisted version of, a communist fucking drone society. Okay, I get it. There's in-between elements. And, some of it, again, Angela says, some of it's insane. Cancel cow milk. I would be with her on that because cow's milk is horrendous for us. You want to talk about an element that the government has been lying to us for generations. Cow's milk is actually very bad for the human body. Okay? But to subsidize the dairy industry, we have been taught since we were children in this
milk, it does a body
fucking
good.
food pyramid.
Pass it on.
You know what I mean? All these, Hollywood people, milk, look at this creamy froth on my face. What we don't talk about is osteoporosis and all the other bone diseases and inflammation and the absolute insanity. And that's without even getting into what we're putting in the fucking cows that translates into the milk.
Yeah, now you can find
antibiotics, fucking growth hormones, all kinds of other fucked up kind of,
it's awful,
shit. And then they wonder why people are getting sick. Who does that actually help? The pharmaceutical industries. People get sick, guess what? You need to buy our drugs now. How do we make sure that you get sick? We make sure that your food supply system is just filled with horrible shit. That's why it's cheaper to go to fucking McDonald's and buy shitty, horrible food than it is to go into any fucking supermarket and actually get fresh foods. And yeah, Helene is right. They've been poisoning our food for generations. They've been spinning us around. They've been putting us against each other. What is being sprayed in our skies? Who the fuck knows? We know for generations that they've used pesticides Now, do I think that they're seeding the clouds with, control mechanisms? No, we're not fucking smart enough for that. That's, again, we're going a little bit down the road. But have they been dumping aluminum dioxide? Yeah, there's a case that they have. There's a case for all types of things. Listen, we didn't find out.
It's like the byproducts of everything else that they just don't give a shit about where they're dumping their waste.
I understand why people are afraid. I understand why people look at a lot of this stuff and are just like, well, if they did this, that, and the other thing, well, then they must have done this. I get it. It's a natural response to the chaos, especially once you open up Pandora's box and you realize what the fuck's inside of it. Mm-hmm. But we didn't know until almost 30 years later that, in the 50s, that they were doing nuclear tests in the United States. And they were just basically out in Nevada and New Mexico letting the fallout drift into populated areas to sit back and let's see what happens. They did it in the Solomon Islands, and they were even more fucking blatant about it because they were just a bunch of, tribal Indian people. Who the fuck gives, nobody gives a shit about them. And it's real shit. They've admitted it. So if they would, do nuclear testing on people, why wouldn't they do any number of these things? Which is, again, what fueled a lot of the earlier elements about, the COVID being a bioweapon. I happen to believe, as John believes and a lot of others believe, is that this was just another example of human stupidity. We know every major country on this planet for many years has been doing biotesting elements. Okay, I don't believe it was developed as a bioweapon. I believe that, like a lot of other research facilities, they are looking for elements to better control aspects of viral loads for the pharmaceutical companies or for whatever the case may be. And again, as usually happens with human stupidity, the fucking genie got out of the fucking bottle, okay? And it's happened before. So, but we've also done it on purpose. We know, and it's documented, that one of our government solutions back in the 1800s was to purposely seed smallpox within Native American reservations.
Yep.
Okay? They knew what it would do, and they didn't care. It was an acceptable solution to what they considered the problem at the time, which was basically, well, they're Indians on this land that we want to take.
We want this land, yeah.
So we must make said Indians go away. We can't be blatant and, well, all right, we'll shoot some of them. It's insanity. Okay, and again, it's not like these things didn't happen. Some people can dance around it and be like, oh, it's bullshit. We know it, all right? We've seen it. It's documented. You look at where we are now versus where we were then, it's very obvious. A lot of scientists, and this is another thing that came out over the past 2 weeks, is that we may already, unfortunately, be within a mass extinction cycle. We are losing animal species. We are losing insects, plants, at incredibly phenomenal rates, at rates that nobody could have predicted and are outside the box on every model that we've had. Now, in fairness, it's hard to model something that nobody alive has really experienced, and historic documentation being what it is, it's kind of hard to pull science from cave drawings. And there are a whole bunch of different variables in play. Some of it is obviously, and listen, and I've gone down it too, Helene, you know what I mean, because it is difficult, and I think this is something that also needs to be said, because a lot of people are not down those rabbit holes by their personal choice. They've been led there. They've been scared. Fear is a powerful tool. It's a weapon as well, too. And we have to remember that it is difficult, especially when you hold it against the light of the things that we do know. It's not hard to draw these correlations, okay? It's not hard to really connect those dots when you look at the absolute horrific atrocities that have been committed within just the scope of recorded history. You know what I mean? It's like for an asshole Nazi fucking Holocaust denier. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that never happened. Well, fucking 8 million plus people say otherwise. You know what I mean? Auschwitz wasn't, like a staged lunar landing. Okay? The type of shit that went on in Vietnam that wasn't, made up. And that's not to say, again, that we weren't, or the guys and the women who were fighting in that weren't doing what they believed was right. But in the same instance, when you're napalming villages, okay, and I'm talking about villages that, for all intents and purposes, were living within the aspect of the fucking Stone Age, they didn't give a shit. And our fucking soldiers came back with all kinds of fucking problems. And it took years, and Helene hits a great point. It took years before they finally got honest and just like, oh yeah, well, by the way, we have this funky chemical called, you know what? They fucked up people's lives. People who went and fought and died believing in the context of their country, believing in the context of freedom and democracy. Okay? And I personally know, I didn't go to Vietnam personally, but I know people who did. All right? I know people who have personally fought in war. And it's horrible. It's fucked up. So again, when you just look at just the very superficial elements of the things that we know are true, the things that we know have been done, either in the name of God or in the name of country, it isn't hard to be like, well, if they did all this shit, why wouldn't they do that? Well, it's kind of hard to argue that they don't. Again, though, we have to take it with a grain of salt. We have to be careful because, again, the stakes are too high, at least within my opinion. There's too much division. Okay, we are all sentient beings. Some of us, yes, are a little bit over here, and some of us, yeah, are a little bit over there. But we should be able to at least find a basic framework, a basic foundation to exist, to have those elements of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And truth will set us free. It's just a tough process now because the truth, quote unquote, is coming to us in so many different forms. How much is truth versus how much, again, is rhetoric and spin and your proverbial snake oil salesmen, your false prophets, your basic scumbag assholes trying to make a buck off the rest of us. Now, and again, as I said earlier, I don't want to come across as ungrateful, okay? I will not lie. Despite everything that we try to do here in getting the vaccines and social distancing and wearing the masks, we all still got nailed. Shiya got nailed a second time.
Twice, yeah.
With the goddamn thing.
But because I had the vaccine, it wasn't as bad.
Right. It wasn't anywhere near as bad. And in every context, and I will just say this from my own personal knowledge, my own personal experiences, that the people that I know in many different circles, in many places outside of the United States as well too, the people that I know who have died all share a common element, that they, for whatever reason, were either afraid or unwilling to do any of the vaccine aspects, that they decided to take on this thing head on. And again, this virus, for whatever reason, okay, and I'm not talking about whether or not it came out of a lab in China or this or that, or for bats fucking monkeys, or whatever the case may be. At this particular juncture, that doesn't matter. What matters is the thing is adapting, it's mutating, okay, and it's killing people. Now, will we get lucky? I hope so. I hope that this thing, no, that I'm not saying that, but the people that I know personally, okay, are having a harder time, and the ones who are dying with it. Of the people that I know personally who have gotten sick from the COVID, the ones who have died, unfortunately, all did not have any element of the vaccine. Okay, that's been the common variable. Now, that doesn't mean that we've all gotten sick. Shiya's gotten sick twice with it, but it wasn't as devastating. There's at least some semblance of a line of defense. And again, that's how vaccines work, and they are, again, by their very definition, designed as a defense layer. It is not 100%. There are people who have unfortunately had bad responses to it, and that is an unfortunate, shitty thing, and it shouldn't be dismissed or swept under the rug. And I don't mean that we should trust the pharmaceutical companies to the degree, but we have to look at context, okay? We have to look at context versus what is going on versus the context of other things. Yes, we know that the pharmaceutical companies manipulate things. There's no reason why diabetics should be paying the kind of money they are for, life-saving drugs. We know that the systems are warped and that they're manipulated, and that most of them, okay, are designed purely for profit, okay? But guess what? By its very nature, that is the default problem with a healthcare system that's based for profit. That's why, again, you have the trade-offs, and it's tough. Now, again, I do see, and that's a viable, and I like that. Helene puts out a very good point. Some of the vaccine elements probably were pushed out too early. And the mutating aspect, yes, there are going to be variables of that do come into play. But again, there is now, I believe, enough there, and we're seeing it play out now in real time, that a lot of people are getting sick, but there is, again, the beginning of a shift. I'm saying this in the aspect because I don't want to see anybody out there suffer. I don't want to see anybody's children. I don't want anybody to have to watch their children die or their friends die. And it isn't just about death. Again, we have a good friend whose quality of life has been completely turned upside down by the damage that this thing did. Now, is there, you can't run and hide. I get it. I'm not saying that, everybody should just run out and do it just because everybody else is doing it. I just think we need to have better conversations, more honest conversations about what's going on out there versus a lot of the rhetoric and the spin. I understand, okay, if for particular specific elements, when Ash talks about, she had a reaction. And yeah, unfortunately, Cindy Lou, this isn't the Lady Shiya show. I'm sorry, it isn't what it used to be for you. You don't like this show anymore, and that's that's a great example. Cindy Lou has the personal choice to be like, hey, she doesn't like this show. She doesn't want to hear this, and that's okay.
This one isn't my show. This is the Wolf Show.
And again, if you listen to what I'm saying, I'm trying to find a middle ground for everybody. Okay. it isn't always just about, magic and this or that. They're about real things. And especially when they affect people within your lives, aka everybody in this house getting sick within 24 hours, and that sickness being pretty, it wasn't just like, hey, I had a runny nose and some fucking diarrhea. Okay, it ran an ugly little course in here.
Yeah, it did.
And it makes you think. Now, again, I put that out there to share. I put it out there to have a conversation, to talk about some of these elements, to say, hey, listen,
and we don't
let's
disparage anybody. They're just experience.
Let's not hate. Let's not just accept certain narratives. Just like I'm coming out there and saying, hey, just because you choose to believe in a particular thing doesn't make you less of a person. But let's have an honest conversation. Let's look at why these things are playing out. Let's look at why these aspects are in play. Let's look at the context. Let's look at what's underneath. Because again, it all ties together. You want to talk about, and I'll use the analogy to give Cindy, a fair shake here, how Lady Shiya was like how it used to be. Lady Shiya is still the same Lady Shiya that she was. We still do all those different elements, but we actually have other conversations. Magic, and Shiya talks about this as well as I do, and science are flip sides of the same coin. What was magic 100 years ago is science now. And what is magic today will no doubt be science tomorrow. This is how it works. This is how the universe is structured. We, as we move along, we learn and we adapt and we evolve.
Yeah.
Okay? So this type of conversation, you couldn't have it with a caveman 5,000 fucking years ago. So what does that say? And again, I'm not getting into, you can throw the religious element in it and, come at it from those types of things. But just from what we know, our basic understanding of things, we know as a species that we have evolved. There was a point in time when we didn't have cars, we didn't have TV, we didn't have cell phones. Where did all that shit come from? It didn't just magically fucking appear. So you can make a case that, yeah, maybe God made the world in 7 days and he created the dinosaurs and stuff, but Jesus didn't come down and start cell phone technology. And I'm sorry, and I don't mean that to be offensive to anybody who has that faith, but truth is still truth. The two have no correlation. Okay? One is based off of religious belief and faith, and the other is, unfortunately, what's called science. Okay? So everybody interacting here is using technology and using science. But again, not that far in the past, what we're doing would have been labeled as heresy. It would have been labeled as witchcraft. Okay? Women were burnt for promoting elements of basic medicine. Okay? For promoting elements that really were even older than they were passed along in lores and within families and aspects. And again, magically enough, our science today. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where did your penicillins and, all these other things have come from elements of the old? We learn how to use plants, how to use the elements of our environment to survive, to build better future. So again, all I'm saying is that these things are all tied together. You can't evolve, you can't grow spiritually if you're living inside a plastic bubble in the real world. And Shiya and I both talk about a lot that all these elements are great. They're important. They're tools. But as with all tools, if you don't know how to use the tool, and to use, Ash's analogy, it's just a bunch of fucking angry monkeys running around swinging hammers. Okay? Context.
Now, I'd like to say something just on a, spirituality side is that, we can respect on the spirituality side that people have differing views. And we are very happy to respect other people's views. And we want to have just a good healthy conversation about it. You know, your views don't have to necessarily be my views, don't necessarily have to be everybody else's views. So, you know, if you want to agree with the views, great. If you want to disagree with the views, that's great too.
But we
Let's
wanted
talk
to have
about
an
it.
honest conversation.
Yeah.
And especially with how I felt, with what I went through. And, you know, Shy was there and watched. I'm not going to lie. It made me think. And I had a few of those moments where, like, we did everything that we could. Got the fucking vaccines. We social distanced. Wore the fucking masks. And we still got the fucking thing. Okay? So, yeah, it makes you question. But also in the same instance, I don't want any of you to suffer. I don't want you to have to watch somebody you care for suffer just because we can't just find a fucking middle ground to try and take care of each other. I'm not asking everybody to like it. I'm not asking everybody to agree. But at some point for a society to function, we all have to give a little. So you got to decide where you want to fucking just give a little. I'm not saying you got to give everything. I'm not saying giving up your fucking freedom. But I'm also saying you don't get to have it both ways. If you want to say that, hey, you have the right to choose, okay, I'm for that. But then you don't get to tell women everywhere what they get to do with their body.
Right.
Okay? It has to go both ways. Now, you can make a case for a lot of these different elements. You know, you talk to vegans, and they lose their fucking minds over, you know, elements of fur and meat. And I get it, it's fucking crazy. You know what I mean? It feels like PETA's hiding in the shadows, just waiting to cancel your ass. But also in the same instance, if somebody's running around on the job pulling their dick out to their female interns, then yeah, fuck you, you get canceled. Okay, we have to draw realistic lines for the betterment of everybody. And again, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I'm not saying we're always going to agree. But again, that context, that fine line, has to exist to some degree. It's the same rationale while we say it's not okay for child molesters to teach preschool. I think everybody here could agree on that. But guess what? The child molesters are not going to agree. You know what the first thing they're going to fucking say is? You're infringing on my rights. Okay? What about my right to choose to fucking 8-year-old girl in her ass? Oh. Now all of a sudden the whole thing falls apart. So guess what? Yeah, sometimes we have to draw lines that are not going to be perfect for everybody. It's about protecting the greater good. Okay? And again, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. And I know it's a horrible analogy, but sometimes horrible analogies are what we need to understand what's really at play. You know, people talk about freedom. You know, a lot of these freedoms are fucking illusions. Okay? Yeah. Try not paying your mortgage for 4 or 5 months. I guarantee you they'll come and take your fucking house. They don't give a shit.
Nope.
Bounce a check. Find out if you think that they won't show up at your house at 3 o'clock in the morning to take you to county jail. Okay? Go speeding down the highway at night with your lights off. You have the right. I have the right to drive on whatever side of the road I want. Then I don't want to use headlights because they restrict my freedom. Guess what? It's going to end up fucking bad. It's the same reason why we have certain elements of things called laws. When we say, hey, you can't have a blood alcohol and get in a car and go driving. Anybody that's ever had anybody that they care about or know about killed by a fucking drunk driver would absolutely jump up, lose their fucking minds if you were to, you know, again, freedom. He has the right to get drunk and go driving and kill whoever he wants. Yeah, see how that fucking works for everybody. It's bullshit. And I'm sorry again if this comes across harsh. But if we don't have honest conversations, guess what? Nothing changes. And if nothing changes, what is the natural conclusion of that? We all get fucked.
Yep.
All of us, we get fucked. And you're right. I use it as a visual thing. You can't compare certain elements of things. But also in the framework, though, unfortunately, that's the only way it's going to translate I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, you have to look at, you can't talk about it on one side of the fence and then just say it doesn't apply. That's where the elements of a lot of the disagreements will come from. What is true versus what's quote unquote fake news, and what is acceptable to, again, a quote unquote civilized society. Again, I think 99.9% of people will agree that we have to have standards in place to protect against the deeper, more obvious insanities. Again, you can't have child predators and rapists and murderers give them a blank card to basically say, well, you have freedom, do whatever you want. No, you can't. You can't do that. Now, again, it gets a little sketchier when you start getting into any other elements of things. A lot of the hype now has been in, some of this transgender type of identification elements, and how it also plays now within our schools. And you have men who identify as women competing in women's sports, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now you get into a little bit more slippery slope. But me personally, as a parent and a person, I believe that line needs to be established. So again, I'm okay with finding some basic compromises, but in the same instance, as a parent, I don't want a fucking child molester just having open access to my child. I don't think any parent would. And I don't believe that that's, something ridiculous or un-American or unfair. Certain behaviors, certain actions come with consequences. So if your behavior is to, again, molest little children, the consequences are, as far as I'm concerned, and in my opinion, you get removed from society. Okay? Because you're now a threat. The old Star Trek analogy, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yeah.
It's not always the case. Sometimes there are variants, and just like most things, and I think, again, most people agree, it's not always 100%. It's not always going to be pretty, but it has to begin with, again, an honest dialogue about what's going on. Why is it going on? And what can we do as context? And yeah, John puts out a thing. He believes in the principle, do whatever you like, just don't hurt anyone. Yeah. Anyone else's property, and don't infringe on anyone else's right. Now, that's not to say we don't need the regulations and laws to prevent harm, property damage. But again, this is where we get into now start sliding a little bit, because one person's perspective, and there's your key phrase, perspective. A child molester's perspective is just that, a child molester's perspective. Very few people are going to understand, agree, relate, or have any context with that, because it's just something that for most of us is not inherently right. But again, and I've seen the argument. Okay, I've seen the argument made numerous times, unfortunately. I've seen the Bible used. Oh, you know what I mean? The Bible says it's okay to have sex with children. Yeah, 2,000 years ago, women were traded like cattle, and women were having children literally as soon as they were able, sometimes at 11, 12 years old. Okay? That doesn't mean that it works today in the here and now. That was then. This is now. Just like it was magic then, and it's science now. We've learned, we've adapted, we've grown. So again, you can make, again, a case to some degrees from a religious framework. You go out into the Middle East, a lot of that cultural basis still, unfortunately, looks at women like cattle. And they are treated as, second-class citizens at best. They are gang raped and murdered based on old religious translations. Again, you look at places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it's a fucking shit show. And I'm sorry, and I don't mean that to be offensive against any religion. And then you'll get a lot of people to jump on screen. Oh, well, you're infringing on... No, I'm not infringing on Muslims, because I know a lot of fucking Muslims that don't believe in any of that shit. They don't raise their children that way. They don't sell their children off. They don't rape children. They don't fucking terrorist bomb. They believe in aspects of the Quran and Muhammad, and they have a different interpretation of that element. Just like, okay, Christianity. Okay. Hitler was a fucking Catholic. Does that make all Catholics Nazis? Fuck no. Okay? You gotta, again, look at things in context. The Crusades were absolutely horrible. The Pope, at that point in time, just basically was like, go kill the brown people. You know what I mean? In the name of God. So, again, you can look at it historically that we've been fighting religious elements since the beginning of time. We've been fighting cultural elements the beginning of time. We've been fighting disease, hunger, and inequality since the beginning of time. So how do we fucking change it? How are we thousands of years down the pike and we're still struggling with what in my mind would be some basic elements? One of my running jokes, and I don't talk about this as often, but maybe I should more. You want a blueprint for what maybe is a better framework? Look at fucking Star Trek. Star Trek said we would have men and women of different colors, different species, interacting for a common good. Is it perfect? No. So, again, is it a better example? I think so. We know already, just from history, that we used elements of Star Trek in developing technology. Where do you think fucking cell phones came from? And again, Angela says it, Hitler wanted to be a priest before he became a statesman. And Ash says it, there are a lot of people on the southern border raped. Listen, children and people, women, men, are raped and murdered all over the place. It's not exclusive to Muslims or Christians or Jews or atheists. It's human nature. Human nature. And that translates based on, guess what? Perspective. Context. And yes, art does imitate life, and life imitates art. I think that's almost unavoidable, because art is reflective of us, of our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our fears, our desires. Again, these are all translated, and in that aspect, it would stand to reason that there are going to be carryovers in elements of things. You look at the Tate LaBonca murders from the 60s, aka the Manson murders. Okay, Charles Manson didn't actually kill anybody per se, but he manipulated using aspects of weaponized empathy, as I call it, in manipulating very confused and weak individuals around him. He sent minions, as Ash said, but he also framed it behind popular culture, and aka he used the Beatles' White Album as a psychological, I guess you could say, crowbar to influence the kids that were in the family, that, the things that he said were coming. And he presented himself as the leader, as a savior, a messiah, father, whatever you want to call it, and stuff. Like, by his own admission, by his own words. Okay, again, he was quite proud of it. But the horror that was unleashed around that was specifically designed, and a lot of people don't know this or have forgotten this, was designed to cause chaos and dissent. Originally, what they were trying to do is they were trying to put aspects of white people against black people. by Charles Manson's own words, they were lighting the fuse for the unavoidable, quote unquote, race war that needed to be. Now, racism isn't anything new, and that's just one example. But again, when you talk about elements of things, context, perspective, you talk about Manson, first thing that goes into anybody that knows anything about it are the murders of Sharon Tate and the Levankas and all that, and the whole helter-skelter, and a bunch of crazy, dirty fucking hippies. They don't remember or make the connection that there was a whole lot of other things that were actually in play that Manson was doing, and the reasons why he did what he did. Now, there's no coincidence that we've seen this pattern again in history, repetitively. Your Jim Joneses, your David Koreshians, your fucking Mussolinis, the list goes fucking on and on and on and on and on. These are all human men, sometimes women, but usually the majority of these elements are men. Okay? You need a fucking Elizabeth Bathory, blood queen. Your Lizzie Bordens, don't get me wrong, you still have, but it's usually men driving these insane narratives based on, again, some twisted element of control, manipulation to achieve some other agenda. And we found, again, historically, that they've been bullshit. They've been bullshit, and bullshit past the pound, bullshit, layers of bullshit. And who pays the price? Innocent people, children, families, mothers, brothers. Now, in a correlative element, these aspects, I believe personally, are many times learned behaviors. They are passed down generationally in many forms. We talk about, Shiya talks about it a lot, within traumas, the shadow work that we talk about relates to these elements that we've been exposed to, for better, for worse, regardless of what the context, what the specific scenario is. But they're still life-altering. They change us, they adapt us, they mold us, and sometimes they force us into aspects where we have to adapt in ways that we normally would not choose to. So there are correlations. And that's not to say that everything goes back to Hitler, or, as Freud would say, everything's about fucking your mother. Okay? It's not. It isn't. It's taken out of context. Now, again, and Shiya has indicated to me that she wants me to switch over.
No, there you go.
There you go. She wants me to put the chat up there for everybody.
Because you got people in different streams that are chatting.
But there are aspects that we can take and learn. Helene says, yes, she hates Freud. And I understand. Because there's a lot of elements in Freud that are hard to swallow. However, again, if you look at it in context, in the time period, you can see, I believe, the elements where certain aspects of the time carries over. And a lot of that is, unfortunately, in this case, the perceptional base between the sexes, between men and women. It was still very much male-dominated, and it was very much still framed around very old dogmatic control mechanisms in how not only men acted, but how women were supposed to act. And Helene makes a great point, and again, this historically gets smoothed over, but yeah, a lot of Freud's own sexual perversions you can see in his writings and within his quote-unquote studies, how they carry over. You know what I mean? But that wasn't a thing. A lot of the elements that he was talking about we're unheard of, let alone even voiced. So whereas you can hate the man, don't hate the message, because some of it is true. Some of it he did get right. Now, how do we apply that? Well, it's difficult. Here's the problem with all these things. It's all very generic. And the simple truth is, everybody is unique. You can make commonalities of things, okay? If you cut a finger or a toe off, you're probably going to bleed, and that's going to be pretty much universal across the board. But a lot of injuries, traumas, again, as we refer to, are not physical in nature. They are emotional. And they don't have the same signs, the same dots that you can connect. And Helene, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is still male dominated. And it's going to continue to be until men learn to be better examples, unfortunately. And I say this as a father. It is the thing that I believe that I learned the most in the journey of being a parent and raising a son, is that this is learned behavior. Okay, we are responsible for the actions because those actions carry forward. And especially with children, we know how our life cycle works, and it's pretty much true of all species, is that the young within the species will mimic, okay, they will copy elements within the older parent or whatever framework that you have. We see it in primates and monkeys, we see it in wolves, we see it in all types of different systems. But the point of the analogy really is, again, they will mimic, they will copy these things because that's how we're wired. They see it, they copy it, and then they adapt it into their own framework. So yes, until we have more of an element where men saying, no, this is not how it should be, you're going to continue to see that pattern, because that's what the pattern was in the beginning, and it's been reinforced over, thousands of years, over generations. So what do? We have to talk. That was, again, the theme from the beginning. We have to have conversations. And Ash is right, women still need to set good examples as well. This is not, again, to put it off, but in being fair and honest with Helene's point, I don't like and I don't believe that, again, that one issue necessarily has to convolute the others. I see this argument with men all the time, and be like, well, hey, you shouldn't act that way, da-da-da-da. Well, what about what women? No, fuck what other women are doing. You need to take responsibility for your own fucking shit. We need to deal with one problem at a time. Now, I say that as a man because I constantly see the deflection, I constantly see the avoidance, and I constantly see the double standard. You know what I mean? They want to treat a woman like a whore when it's time to get laid, but God forbid somebody looks at their daughter or their sister or their mother in a sexual context, all of a sudden now it's a violation. Mm-hmm. Double standard. We should, by default, treat everybody, regardless if they're male or female, or again, neutral, binary, whatever the fuck it is, with a base level of respect, aka nobody should be objectified unless they want to be objectified. Now, if that's your thing, you have every right. You find somebody, again, within the scope of consenting behavioral elements, and that's fine, that's cool. Okay? Does that mean that, you should be able to go out there and fuck horses whenever you want? No, because the horse has no say in it. Now, that's just me personally. I think that that's a violation. Does that mean, again, like the earlier discussion, that children should just be sexualized? Absolutely fucking not. It's insanity, okay, to throw that context in there. We don't live in that kind of world anymore, nor should we tolerate it.
Agreed.
Now, Helene makes another great point. Children need parents, but I can tell you, okay, and I'm sorry, you know what I mean, I like a lot of what you're saying, but many times it isn't that case. My son's mother was an absolute train wreck. She was a clusterfuck. I spent good majority of my child's life raising him as a single parent. And I can't tell you if it would have been better if she were a different person, but I can tell you in no uncertain terms that the damage and the chaos that she brought, we did better on our own without her. Okay? I'm sorry. And I mean that no disrespect to mothers who struggle and do the things they have to do. It isn't fair. It's a shit sandwich. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. I tried to do what I could. Maybe I could have done this. Maybe I couldn't have done that. But you know what I did do? I made my child the priority. I made him the center of the focus to make sure, to the best of my ability, that I not only taught him, but I protected him. Okay? Protect is an important concept. That means that sometimes we have to make sacrifices. That means sometimes we don't get to go out to the bars and have a good time. Or we get to go out and just fuck anyone that we want. Because for a child, and it goes back to the elements of learned behavior, how do I teach my son to respect women if he sees me disrespecting women? Guess what? It doesn't work. And there's where it breaks down. That's where it falls apart. You can talk whatever bullshit you want to talk. Words mean nothing without the actions that back them up. And some of it is really subtle. How do I, as a man, as a father, translate that to a young child? You can't. So the only option was no other elements of relationships. I didn't fuck around and bring other women into the scenario. I focused on being a parent. And guess what? That meant that I had to sacrifice a part of my life where I didn't get to do all the things I wanted to do. Now, I don't say that in spite or regret. I made that choice. I was happy to make that choice then, and I'm even happier with it now because I look at my son and I look at the man that he not only has become, but that he continues to evolve, and I know it was the right fucking thing.
I agree.
Okay? I have seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen what happens with young men, okay, who basically were exposed to what a lot of guys feel is totally acceptable behavior. Oh, look at that ass, you know what I mean? When I was young, okay, we were, again, conditioned that women were conquest, that you are sexual objects, that, you didn't have, thoughts, you didn't have a say. My father's philosophy was the same as his father's philosophy. Suck my dick, shut up, make me a sandwich, or I will fucking beat the shit out of you. And even then, if you look at me wrong, or do something that I don't like, I still might beat the shit out of you. Okay, it was a fucking miracle that my family was able to survive that chaos. But he was a product of his father, who was like the poster child for the dysfunctional male. And we won't even get into that. That requires its own fucking podcast. But this was a generational element, or as some people have called it, generational curses. But it was learned behavior. It was taught behavior. His father taught him, whose father taught him, and then my father tried to pass that on. I got lucky, okay, and I say that I got lucky because my mother was of a different generation. She was of a different cut, if you will. And despite the mistakes that she made, she still made it a point to give me the tools to understand the difference, to be able to break the cycle with my own son, to change that dynamic. And no coincidence, within my own family structure, the people, okay, the siblings who followed in my father's wake have all destroyed their lives. The siblings, as is myself, and my brother, my younger brother and sister who have followed in my mother's wake, all have productive, happy lives with children of their own. There is no coincidence. Is it 100%? Again, obviously no. But these are learned behaviors. So how do we change them? Again, we have to talk about them. We have to say, hey, guess what? This shit really does exist. Now, again, in the conversation of the male toxicity, for men, and I say this a lot, and I will continue to say it, it begins with simple elements. When you see men acting incorrectly, we need to call it out. Unfortunately, right now, we live in times and stuff that we have people being, attacked on public transit. And people just stand around with their phones and videotape it. They'll fucking do anything. It's this level of apathy. It's insanity. But some of it has to start with, calling things out. Now, some people have a problem with that. Yeah, there's a fine line. We can't cancel people just because we don't like what they have to say. But yeah, if you're running around, like I'll use the analogy. You look at one of the headlines and it talks about Evan Rachel Wood and just basically the narcissistic nightmare that she has. What is the Marilyn Manson?
Yes.
I'm so disgusted by him as a human being that I have a hard time even remembering his name. But long story short, basically he's another one of these serial entitled, male assholes that, basically has, objectified and exploited women. And she finally came out and said, listen, this guy basically groomed me and raped me and did all these things. And everybody's freaking out. Fuck you. What if that was your sister? What if that was your mother? We need to call out certain things for what they are. I'll use another analogy. Louis C.K. I happen to think that Louis C.K. is a good comedy writer. Okay? I liked him as an actor. I liked him as a comedian. But I'm sorry if you don't have the basic understanding and control to know that you just can't whip your dick out whenever you want. We have to have a conversation. We have to address it. It's not acceptable. Okay? No woman should have to go through these elements. Okay? They shouldn't. Just like African Americans shouldn't have to go through what they're going through, or any of the marginalized elements of people around us, be it from a sexual context, be it from a religious context. Just because you believe in a particular God doesn't mean that you should be persecuted. But if you're going out there and you're sacrificing little children to your God, then guess what?
Shiya.
Fuck you. I'm sorry. You've
right
now crossed the line.
Somebody else's face.
And John said it, I thought, very aptly earlier. People should have the right to live and love based on how they feel within a basic framework, as long as it's not carrying over onto somebody else. It's not at their expense. Okay, AKA, you don't get to justify rape just because it's what you want to do.
No.
And Helene makes a great point. Roman Polanski. Thank you. That's a great analogy because a lot of people don't know about that. I believe that knowledge is power. Roman Polanski, yes, is indeed a child rapist and is still accepted. And there, I believe, lies again a great shining example of the double standard that we say. We condemn Charles Manson and the family and all of them for what they did to Sharon Tate, and rightfully so. But why do people like Roman Polanski and your Harvey Weinsteins, okay, and your Jeffrey Epsteins, who were enabled for years and years and years and years, and this is not a political thing. This is a power thing. This is a money thing. This is a cultural thing. And again, it is learned behavior. Woody Allen, thank you. Great analogy.
Yep.
Okay? So yes, sometimes certain people need to get canceled for certain behavior. Now, do I believe that that should carry over on everything? No. There's a big fucking difference between a Roman Polanski and a Woody Allen with the things that they've done, quote unquote, behind the guise of their art, and Dave Chappelle making, a joke about transgender people, okay? There's a big fucking difference. Well, it wasn't just that people didn't like him because he married his adopted daughter. He had exhibited a lot of very untasteful and fucked up behavioral patterns with actresses that he worked with. Alfred Hitchcock was also notorious for that. Men of power, unfortunately, have been notoriously serial abusers because there's nothing to hold them in check. There's nothing that says, hey, that you can't do it because it's an acceptable thing. So again, this is where I believe the dialogue needs to really happen, and we're seeing it shift in aspects of the Me Too movement and, you know, some of this cancel culture that's freaking people out, because guess what? A big part of why people are getting freaked out is because people are actually getting called out on it. People are actually now being held to a little bit better standard. Are we there yet? Absolutely fucking not. We got a long way to go. But it's something. Arnie Hammer, yeah. The list goes fucking on and on and on. It's a deep, ugly goddamn list. And it's difficult because it is, and let's be honest, it is so framed, at least into Western culture, that it's absolutely fucking insane. You know, women are objectified. You turn on a fucking TV, women are objectified. You know, you open up a newspaper, women are objectified. You go to the fucking clothing store, women are objectified. Okay, our entire system is based off of objectification to many degrees, and a lot of it is framed from sexuality. Okay, places like Pornhub wouldn't exist otherwise. And I'm not saying that it's some kind of fucking prude. I don't have a problem personally with porn. Okay, what I have a problem with is people being exploited under the guise of art. All right, yeah. And I know plenty of women who say upfront, and you know, hey, I enjoy it. I was able to make money. I did what I wanted. But for every one woman who had that element, there were 10 other women that were manipulated into it, be it through drugs, desperation, Helene, yeah, Bill Cosby. You know, again, the list goes on and on and on. But some of it, again, is that framework of the learned behavior, the taught behavior. Women are objectified. And I'm sure all you women, or I'm going to assume that you women understand and agree to the context that we've created a system where women are judged. They're judged by the shit.
Judged no matter.
I'll let my woman.
Yeah.
I'll let my woman speak. Go ahead, woman, speak.
If you smile, then you're being overly flirtatious. If you don't smile, well, you should smile more often. If you wear a short skirt, then you're being flirtatious.
Ooh, baby, look at that ass.
Right. If you wear a long dress, you're being a prude. If you have kids too early, then you rushed into life.
Hey, wait, you're not interested in me?
If you have children,
oh, you must be a lesbian.
There's something wrong with you.
Yes.
You know, there's a double standard on judgment for women. I don't care what it is, whether you pick left, right, up, down, sideways, somebody's going to say that you need to go the opposite direction. Your choice is wrong.
Ah.
Sorry.
Which is, you know,
soapbox.
Interestingly enough, kind of revolves us all the way back to the very beginning of some of these elements that we're discussing about freedom, rights, the choices that most of us, I believe, that we feel not only entitled to, but we want.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you balance that? How do you jibe that to say in one instance, well, I want the freedom to have a gun. Okay, that's cool. Do you know how to use a gun? Are you going to do something stupid like go into a school and shoot children? Maybe we should take a closer look at that. Maybe we should have some systems and balance. I believe in that element that, a law-abiding citizen should have the right if they want. Okay? But again, here we go back to the slippery slope. If we're going to run with that system, then why shouldn't a woman have the right to choose in regards to what's done with her body?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't a woman be paid the same for performing a job that a man does? Why should women be forced into a context where they constantly have to be judged based off the shape of their ass and their tits, or what they're willing or not willing to do sexually for a job or for, all these other things. Again, it's a double fucking standard. I guarantee you, and this is a running joke that I see a lot, if we were to flip this around and say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't worry about controlling women's bodies, maybe we need laws to control men's bodies, aka we need a law that says, guess what, you're not allowed to just pull your dick out and stick it wherever you want. You're now responsible for your own dick. And with that means, now, all of a sudden, men are held to a different level and a standard. And
Now,
I can guarantee you that it would go batshit. You think it's fucking crazy right now? Go ahead. Have somebody try and put some element into play, at least from the Western culture, United States, that says that now men, okay, we're going to tell men what to do with your bodies, who you get to fuck, how you get to fuck, and why you get to fuck. They lose their goddamn minds. It's a double standard.
yeah.
So again, the simpler, more logical solution, at least in my mind, okay, is we discuss the double standard. Nobody has the right to tell anybody else what to do with their body unless they put somebody else into harm.
Yeah.
So AKA, and I'm sorry, but if you're positive for the COVID or the plague or herpes or AIDS, you don't just get to go and run around and expose the rest of us. You're responsible now for your choice in that. And you're right, Helene. Most men will not take birth control. But again, how can anybody...
Or if they do, they'd lie about it.
Perhaps. But again, how do you, with a straight face, say it's okay to tell women what to do with their bodies, but it's not okay to tell men?
But, I'm...
Well, obviously, Chris, I mean, again, here is where we start crossing into the sexuality line. And I went through this as a single parent because I refused, even though, for all intents and purposes, my wife was gone. We were still, still married, but she took off, okay? I did not get into relationships. I didn't have sex for years, okay? I was just terrified of what kind of model, what type of example that was going to set for my kid. And I was just so hell-bent that I was not going to let the past repeat because of my experiences with my own father, that I said, you know what, this is the right thing to do. And I spoke to people, you know what I mean? I talked to other men, I talked to women, I talked to family members, and I believed it was the right choice. How do you set a standard? How do you set a context with somebody if you can't live by it? Okay? So I had to live by those ideals. But I can't tell you how many times, because I was a single parent, without a girlfriend, without a woman, that must mean that I'm gay. I'm a fag.
I can attest personally, he is definitely not.
Okay, but that's beside the point. And not that would be wrong.
No.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. But the assumption, and as Chris had mentioned, when she got down to Texas, she hadn't been having no kids. All of a sudden, oh, well, that must mean you're a lesbian. Oh, God forbid. You heathen woman. How dare you? It's insanity. Now, granted, most of the people throwing fucking rocks in this glass house are the same characters hiding out in airport bathroom stalls for glory holes, just looking to blow somebody randomly. And my running joke is, what's the matter? All dressed up, nobody to blow? It's fucked up. Okay? It's not fair. Okay? And if we're honest about it, sets the example, creates these levels of dysfunction. And no offense, again, to Chris or Angela, anybody, this is not a judgment context. Some of this is satirical, sarcasm in the element, that who you love is who you love. It shouldn't matter. Okay? Lesbian, straight, gay, bi, binary, whatever the case may be, if it isn't hurting anybody else, and obviously is within a basic framework. Okay, like again, I don't care who wants to fuck who. I would just, personally prefer it if you don't do it in the middle of the street in front of my kid's school. Please at least have the basic decency to do it in your home where nobody else has to see. But also, again, we're going to have an honest conversation. We have literally created the art life monster where people all of a sudden become influential and important and famous because of fucking somebody. Okay, I'm sorry, but Kim Kardashian doesn't have anything to offer anybody. The only reason she's even known is because she got famous for a sex tape. Now, how many women have done porn and, nobody gives a shit about them, don't listen to them, but when a Kim Kardashian does it or a Paris Hilton does it, oh, well, that's okay. In the same instance, you talk about like your Harvey Weinsteins and your Woody Allens, they ran around for fucking years. Jeffrey Epstein, just fucking and doing whatever they wanted, and nobody gave a shit. People just watched it happen. Okay? That's starting to change finally. Now people are getting called out. And a lot of guys are be like, well, we just thought it was okay. Because nobody taught them. Nobody showed them that this is fucking wrong. So we've created levels of dysfunction now that are generational. And again, it cuts both ways. It's exploited. Anybody who's ever watched a documentary about like the children's beauty pageants, or if you take a look at something like MTV 16 and Pregnant, we have sexualized our children to the degree that, here we go. Here's an example, 13 years old, dressed as slutty as you can, because that's the only way that anybody's going to pay attention to you or going to get anywhere. What kind of fucking message is that for young women? It's insane. Now, granted, a lot of that is based because of men, so I'm not blaming women, but as Ash said, it's a two-way street. Okay, it can't just be about men. It has to be about all of us. Or as Helene says, again, it takes a village. And again, as corny and as hokey as that sounds, we have to think differently. We have to communicate differently. We have to find a way to cut through the rhetoric, cut through the bullshit. There has to be a little bit better lines of accountability, you know what I mean?
No,
and be it if it's if it's Oprah lining it up, or if it's a Harvey Weinstein, or if it's your local priest, or any number of analogies within the frameworks of our societies. We cannot allow certain elements to just be acceptable. We have to draw those lines and have to say no. Okay, you don't get to fuck children. Okay, I'm sorry. You got to go. Okay, consequences.
Now I will say there is also an opposite side. I have heard, and I have somebody I consider a close personal friend, male, who has been sexually harassed by a female, but because he's a guy. It's him that has to make his schedule adjustments to not be on the same shift as the sexual
and listen, but this is a side, and I will attest to this as well because I've experienced it as a performing musician, as a single parent. I've been through it many times. Unfortunately, men have fucked things up to such a degree for so long that the men of the here and now, this generation, and at least the next couple of generations, unfortunately, we're going to have to pay the price for the sins of our fathers.
And
this is the
sucks.
shitty reality, because unfortunately, does this make it right? No. And I'm one of those people, I will be absolutely honest, I have a hard time with it because I know the damage that's been done. Did I enjoy it? No. Okay? And I'm not going to lie. I've had a lot of men say to me, what the fuck is wrong with you? That they would dream for that. I'm sorry, I did not appreciate in the middle of performing some random drunk woman grabbing my dick. Okay, I didn't enjoy it. I'm sorry. Doesn't make me gay. It just means that there are a time and a place. And just like I don't believe it's acceptable to just grab somebody by the pussy, don't grab me by the dick. I don't care if you're a male or if you're a female or if you're binary. Nobody gets to touch my dick without my consent. Okay? So, again, it happens though. Yeah, men are sexualized too. But in fairness, women are also taught that they're taught that they have to use the sexual element to be heard.
Yep.
That this is the only way that they can interact. You know, Helene speaks, she talks about just that she had a photographer in New York who approached her for her two youngest. He was a legit artist. Big agency said that 15 should be the age of consent. Well, I disagree. I don't think 15 should be the age of consent. And I agree with you. Your babies are not for sale. Sometimes we have to draw the line. You know what I mean? I wouldn't let my son at the shows or do anything musically with me until after he graduated high school. And it wasn't because I didn't believe that he could handle it. I did believe he could. But I owed it to him to give him the the real opportunity to kind of have his own framework on it. And I believe, like a lot of other people believe, that 15, especially in today's day and age, it's not the same. It's not the same as it was, 150 years ago, let alone 2,000 years ago. Okay? There are elements in play, especially from the sexual context, that should not be in play for a child. It's not healthy, and it surely is not fair, because it is really, in my mind, a manipulation. Okay, because again, we know from basic science that children will react to whatever they are exposed to. So if you expose them to blatant sexuality, they will confuse that with their own sexuality and they will emulate it, right or wrong. They won't understand it for what it is. And anybody who has interacted or worked with children from abusive elements, from those trauma elements, I don't believe anybody can say in any context that it was something that they asked for or wanted.
No.
Pretty much 99.9% of the time, they have been victimized. Their choice was taken from them.
Agreed.
And whatever the element, the carryover, ended up being in the end, was not of their control. Was not of their choice. And I think a lot of people here can probably relate into some moment in our lives where we have, especially from a sexual context, been put into a situation that we didn't want to be in, that we didn't like how it made us feel, but we didn't know any better, or we were afraid because we didn't want to be less than, or we didn't want to be weird or different, or because it was fear. A lot of different variables, a lot of different reasons how we end up within that scope of that context. But the beginning, the core of it is still the same. Okay, there are choices that have been taken away. Behavior patterns, again, are learned. They're adaptive. Again, not 100%. But again, we have enough information to know that within these scopes, within these elements, these patterns tend to repeat. So, by default, children who grow up within elements of drug and alcohol tend to have drug and alcohol problems. Children that grow up within context of sexual abuse tend to have major problems with relationships and sexuality. The list goes on and on and on. Racism. Children are not born racist. It's learned behavior. It really is. If anybody who's ever interacted with children, it's very easy to see. It's not, again, rocket science. And again, some of this, yes, as Helene said, sins of the father passed on to the son. It's learned behavior. So you have a guy who's been taught all his life that, men don't show emotions, and, the woman, she's a hole to process my brood. And then they have children and they don't give a shit about the children. And they don't interact. And as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to say, they're not fathers, okay? They're absentee sperm donors, okay, who a lot of times the children are better off without it, okay? Really, as a single father, I hate to say it, but, the context of a title, father, mother, okay, it's just a title. If you don't do the part, if you don't put the work in, the actions, they're just empty fucking words. So what ends up happening? You have generations upon generations of disconnect and dysfunctionality, generational traumas that are just, again, passed on down the fucking line. And again, from perspective, just simply from men, okay, nobody wants to talk about it, Oh, well, we're talking about it now more because men are getting called out and actually finding out that, oh, well, maybe there's a price to pay for my behavior. But again, it can't just be based off of when you get caught sticking your dick someplace it's not supposed to be. It's a lot more. Yeah. It's how, again, a child sees the father interacting, how he treats the mother, not just sexually, but within the scope of the entire relationship. Context of communication, respect. You know what I mean? Those things, again, when a child sees a parent beat up and disrespect, fucking, fucking put down, gaslight, emotionally, mentally, oh, you're fat, you're no fucking good. The only thing you're good for is to fuck. What the fuck does that, again, what does that say to a child? So again, we set the stage, and now you have a new generation who've taken these elements. Now again, imagine for a young boy that that's all he ever sees. Okay? So where is the context? Where is the framework that he should act any other way? And what ends up happening is they don't until something goes fucking to shit, like they end up raping somebody or doing some other horrible thing, and now are held accountable. Oh, and they're like, well, but that's how, and you have like, what was the rationale with the whole grabbing of the pussy thing? Well, that's locker room talk. That's just how guys are. Therein lies the core of your problem.
Yep.
It's fucked up. Now again, does that mean that women who want to take a more objectified sexual context should have that choice? Yeah. If a woman wants to be a stripper, or wants to be a prostitute, wants to be whatever she wants to be, that's her choice. But that doesn't mean that with that somehow it makes her less than. And therein lies some of the disconnect in what constitutes a framework of healthy sexuality versus dysfunctional. You can make a case, I personally believe, to the element that a woman should never feel that she has to be. And I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is conditioning. Now, again, I also don't have a vagina. So I'll be the first one to admit that my perspective is limited. So I will be honest and say, I empathize. You know what I mean? I love women. I do. I love you all. I try very hard, and I think Shiya will testify to this. I go out of my way to make it a point not to sexualize elements of things because I don't want to be that guy. And even though my son is a man now, I still don't want to set that example. I don't want to continue the patterns of cycle. So I try to the best of my ability to be open about it and talk about it and say, yeah, even though it's uncomfortable and it's fucked up, let's have an honest conversation because women deserve it, but men deserve it as well too. How do we change things? We got to talk about it. We got to get to it. And we have to realize where it begins, that context. And it begins, as Helene and many others have said, it begins in the home. It begins with the framework of what our children see. And listen, it's not always easy. Sometimes they're really shitty, hard choices. There are a lot of things that my son saw that I wish to God he never saw. And unfortunately, he saw it because at the time frame, I believed and I was trying to save his mother. I loved her. It took.
That's a testament to who you are.
But nonetheless, there was still a price to be paid for it. And part of it was in my conditioning, in how not only I perceived her, but how I perceived my part, aka I overcompensated so much that I allowed the very thing that I thought I was protecting to basically go on.
But like you
but
said,
unfortunately, it
was
framed within the context of the woman I chose, who unfortunately, and again, conversation, I will just leave it at this, was reflective of my father. Yeah, in that case, Freud was right. I found a female version of my father. Don't ask me how that fucking happened.
It happens.
But it happened. But yes, these are the things that we have to talk about and we have to share. So again, I thank you all. Good night, the Goblin Queen. Give our best to the Goblin children.
Yes,
Know you are all loved. Thank you for letting me rant here in the world according to Wolf. I hope that it gives each of you a little bit something to think about. Hopefully something positive. Hopefully something hopeful. We have some interesting things that we're going to be talking about next week. We're going to be doing another promotional context interactive thing. There'll be music again.
The new contest.
Unfortunately, after 2 weeks of just fucking chaotic fever dreams and COVID nightmares and stuff, I just really, again, I'm not going to lie, I wanted to throw it out there. I wanted to share it. I wanted to give people at least some framework of a hope that it isn't all gloom and doom, but that, we need to have honest conversations about things. So with that, know again that I love you all. Thank you. And until next time, as you would say. Yeah, that's your cue.
That's my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay.
But which one do you, usually when we close out, what do you like?
I normally say marry me, marry part until we marry meet again.
There we go. See?
So I didn't know you wanted me to do that. Okay.
Well, yeah, I wanted to give you,
well, thank
your
you.
fair shake.
There's my fair shake.
Yes. And thank you, Diana. Yes, we are getting better from Corona. We're finding our way back.
Yes.
So again, until next time,
Gods.
everybody have a great night and thanks again.
Blessed be, y'all.